Hey everybody, welcome to Glowing Card Education. I don't know what else to call it. I just wanted to, and I kind of had some talk on my channel about Mondami, and I was pretty against Mondami because I know he has socialist, communist policies, and there are things that I know that I come to realize the person I was arguing with probably didn't. And so I'd like to go over some of those things today. I took macro and microeconomics in college, so I know supply and demand, and that's kind of what I want to go over today. I just filmed this video and realized, oh crap, I didn't have my mic on, so I'm refilming it. So hopefully it'll be clear and more concise than I've already done it once. So with all of that being said, let's get into it. So I pulled up a graph of supply and demand, and here we are. This is the invisible hand. And what they mean, oops, excuse me. What they mean by invisible hand is this is a market for something. Let's say this is a market for video games like Nintendo. And hold on. And that's probably not the best example because now everything's digital and the demand would meet the supply no matter what, because you just download everything. But let's just say we're going a little old school here, and there were still hard copies of everything, right? So there is a limited number of, let's say, Mario Kart or Metroid or Super Mario Brothers, whatever the new one will be. Um, the Switch Mario Brothers 4. I don't know. I don't know what they would call their next one. But in a normal market, right, they would produce the supply. So they would make, you know, 1 million units of the game, right? At some point, the demand for that is going to meet the supply. Now, I know this looks like it's going downward, but it's actually increasing. So they are demanding this quantity at this price, right? So if the price was higher, say $100, like Nintendo wants it to be, it would actually, the demand would be here and the supply would be here. And that causes what we call a shortage. And I'll go over that in a second. Um, but basic economics would be they produce so many units, there's a demand for that, whatever that is. So Nintendo has to figure out what price can we sell the most units for. That's how we arrive at this quantity. This is the optimal quantity. Let's say this is $50, right? They're going to sell, let's say this represents 700,000 units, right? So they make 800,000, or they've done some market studies and they realize, "Oh, we could probably sell 750,000 units at this price." And this uh, will generate the biggest profit for us at this price. If we go up, we'll sell less, and we just through that the amount of units that we sell, it's actually going to give us less profit, right? And the same thing if we put it down to $40, right? The demand will be higher. It'll be out here, but we're only going to make this many. So we'll only sell that many, so the profit will be less than optimal. That's how that works. That's called a shortage, and we'll also get into that in a second. But that's how the basic market works, is that every market has this invisible hand that kind of guides quantity and price to this equilibrium point. And you also have, in most cases, other um, companies within the market. So when you get to this, that creates competition. Now you may not have Mario Kart exactly, but all those other racing games may fit into this category. Maybe I think Sonic had one where it was Sonic Racing, and PlayStation had one, Banjo Kazooie, I think, or something. So they were all kind of trying to get into that market in the same kind of way, right? Maybe they don't, maybe it's maybe like the generic version, but it's going to take some of the market. It's not going to give Nintendo everything. That competition gets also moves it to this point. Actually, it's what drives the market to equilibrium. Free market competition gets you to the best price point for you and for the company. It's an equal um, coexistence for both the consumer and the manufacturer of whatever product it is. Chairs, desks, PCs, laptops, RAM. Right now, there's a huge market for RAM, but the demand is for AI, which leaves most of the rest of us out in the cold. So, um, but generally, even that is driving the price because there's now huge demand. So now the supply has to meet, and it shifts that price, right? Supply and demand now are like up here. There's more being produced, but the price is higher. Profits, unfortunately, are better for the company. But the consumer, if you look at those companies making AI as the consumer, it's good for them too. So the market equalizes there. Okay. It's not always great, but that's how markets work. You have a price, you have a quantity, you have supply, you have demand. And this is how it works. This is just how it works. So let's take a look at it when something else comes in and influences, right? So I'm going to talk about government cheese. I know that's probably boring to most of you, but there was a situation, I think it was in the 60s, 50s, 60s, where there were all these dairy farms and they were making all this cheese, but they were just throwing it away because the demand had been saturated. They'd gotten to this equilibrium price and they'd actually exceeded. All there was so much um, supply, it just outweighed the demand. So the government stepped in and they bought all that extra cheese and they stored it away in these. I think they have caves somewhere, but they're vaults of cheese just sitting around somewhere, and they're climate controlled. I think that's probably frozen, dark, vacuum sealed places that would not allow the cheese to go bad. And they're probably sealed in wax or plastic or something like that. I heard a rumor, and I do not know if this is true or not. So take it as it is. I heard that the government cheese, at one point, I'd heard it could last 50 years, but I think that it had increased to like 200 years. And since the cheese just, there's no way for anything to grow in it, it's just sitting in there. So it's just going to keep sitting in there. And I think the government, I don't even know if the government still does this, but the U.S. government is who I'm talking about. The U.S. government um, just has all this extra cheese lying around, and they give it to people on uh, debit, EBT, that kind of stuff, and they actually reimburse stores with this cheese to some extent too. But farmers and dairy farmers still are producing more than the demand that is being called for or met. So as we continue, the surplus is actually just getting bigger and bigger, right? That's one of the ways that's the way socialism works. When you were talking about socialism, we talked about communism, we're talking about government intervention, right? That's what we're talking about. So that relates to the market in this way. They artificially, so to speak, increased surplus or surplus, increased supply, but demand was already down here, right? So now they've increased this supply, but the demand is still only this. So now the price has gone up artificially. So everybody's paying this higher price, and they can have as much as they want because I mean, the government can just give them as much as they need because they have like this just giant supply of. So that's how surpluses are made. Is that the government comes in, artificially raises a price, and now demand for that actually goes down from this Q1 to Q2. This is the amount that now should be supplied, right? But this is the amount actually supplied. So that creates this surplus, right? You got it? So I think in economics, because it's a surplus, I think you count all of this area in this triangle. This is now the amount of the surplus. Because you have all this extra stuff from this point of the supply and demand forward. Actually, I think it's this entire rectangle all the way from Q1 to Q3. All of this is the surplus. It's not just this little triangle, it's all of this. So it's a vast amount. So that's what a surplus is, and that's how they come about. Now let's go to shortages, and let me talk a little bit about Mondami and why these price controls are bad, really bad. So let's scroll down here, and this is what we call a shortage. So when the government comes in, and this is what Mondami wants to do, he's like, oh, prices are way too high, they're out of control, not everybody can afford it. Well, that's the way market works. Not everybody can afford it. But it reaches an equilibrium point where the people who can, the most people who need it or want it, can afford it and get it. Right? So what happens when you artificially lower a price, right? So now you're going from price point P1 to price point P2, or putting a price ceiling, meaning the price can't ever go above this price. And this is what rent control is, right? This is what he's trying to introduce. And the same thing for the supermarkets that will have the prices set at a lower price than the other markets around can afford to match, right? So what happens is now you have demand all the way out to Q3 and you have supply at Q2. This represents the shortage, right? And I think the shortage is all of this area from the P1 down. So this little triangle area here on down. I think that's the way it works, but you might need to, if you're in an economics class, please comment and correct me because I'm not 100% on that. But I do know this is the gap for the shortage. The price is artificially lowered so some people can afford and receive. That's the key point here. They can afford. So all the people that could afford it before can still afford it. But there's now this much less of a supply, right? Now at this price point, all of these people can now afford it. But there isn't enough supply to give everybody that. Whatever it is, housing, tomato sauce, all the goods and services in those supermarkets. That'll be like this. It's kind of like the free buses, right? The price went down to zero. You had virtually limitless demand and very, very limited supply. So you had a huge shortage. And I think because of that, the prices tripled, quadrupled, something like that. It was massive. Um, so the buses I hear are a lot more expensive now. And the same thing happened with snow removal. The same thing happened with the garbage and the garbage strikes and how long that took to get resolved. I do wonder if Mondami is regretting running for and obtaining the mayorship. Maybe not. He's probably making money. Who Everybody kind of makes money in government, but the policies just hurt the people, and this is why. So this is why most people say we need to keep government out of the free market system, and it's true for the most part. You know, you really want to just let the market handle itself. Um, it's weird because before we had taxes, we still had schools. We still had um, hospitals, and we still had infrastructure, roads, sewers, um, ambulance services, cop services. Now, the other thing that happens, and this is the political part, and so I'm going to keep this short, and I don't really want to get into this part. But when the government tells you how much you can make and what the price is, they can also tell you exactly how that needs to be. So, like education, they can tell you what you need to teach because they're supplying the education. So, they're going to supply whatever education they want to give, not what you think your kids should get, not what should be historically accurate or what the market would value, but what the government would value. So it's really not good all the way around. There's several problems to that. But that's why people say, "Hey, we need to keep government out of this," because when the government gets involved and they start messing around with prices, they cause shortages and they cause surpluses. All right. Now, to be fair to everybody else, and I know you probably already do this anyway, but leave me a comment. It, and I really, anybody can leave a comment, I guess, but what I really want to hear from are the people from New York City proper, the ones that are being influenced by Mondami's policies. I don't want to hear people from Queens or Brooklyn or anybody else outside of New York City proper. I really want to hear from those people living in New York, right? And I think probably the guy the other night, why he was so happy with Mondami, um, is that he probably was getting this new price, but he was one of the people actually within the supply. So you're going to have a lot of happy people right here with you. This is going to be your happy guys, right? They have the supply at that price. Everybody else is out in the cold. They're all looking in, and none of them are happy. And from this, just a short shift down, this looks like maybe even maybe a 10% shift down, somewhere in that neighborhood. It looks like half of the people are content with that change and half are not. Um, and it's probably because the people that were not content here are also still not content here. So now instead of having this many people for you, this many people against you, you now have this many people for you and this many people against you. So um, from from a government perspective, even those people enacting policy should not want to do this because they are going to pay the price the most. So just keep that in mind too. Um, and that's my take on it. But I really want to hear strictly from those that reside within the boundaries of New York City itself. And let me know if what your experience has been. Has it been positive with Mondami or negative? Let me have it. Let me have you in the comments. And yeah, that's why communism won't work. That's my video. All right. Uh, more to come on Power World, more video game stuff. I think I'll probably do a review or two as well, and so look for those types of things. All right, that's all I got. Until next time, be good to each other. I'll see you then. Have a great day.